It's your boy Shawnee Sean, and I've got week one power rankings to share and go over, along with some reactions, impressions, biggest surprises from week one. So let's really just dive into it in the first place to really kick things off with kickoffs. The dynamic kickoffs were pretty much a pretty good success week one. DJ Dallas of the Arizona Cardinals scored a touchdown, the first one under the new rules with a 96-yard return. Definitely expect more returns, and I think I saw an article earlier today that I'm looking at right now. There were 172 total kickoffs. 171 of them were dynamic kickoffs and one unsuccessful onside kick. And it looks like 33.3% of the kicks were returned, which is an increase from the 20% of the previous year. So a 13% increase, so not too bad for dynamic kickoffs in week one. Moving on to some new coaches making their marks. Gerard Mayo led the Patriots to a huge upset over the Cincinnati Bengals, 16-10. The Patriots get the win over the Bengals. Jim Harbaugh's Chargers also relied heavily on the run game. And J.K. Dobbins rushed for 135 yards. And the Chargers get a victory as well. So new coaches, even though Jim Harbaugh is coming back into the league after a couple years in college. Couple new quarterbacks in new places. Kirk Cousins struggled a little bit for Atlanta, only throwing for 155 yards and 2 interceptions. But on the other hand, Sam Darnold actually did really well in Minnesota, throwing for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. So interesting to see how both of those quarterbacks develop in their new cities. Moving on to rookie quarterbacks. All 3 of the rookie quarterbacks kind of struggled this week. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix all had some tough debuts. Definitely not as easy as it was in the preseason. Caleb Williams only threw for 93 yards. Jaden Daniels only threw for 184 yards. And Bo Nix only threw for 138 yards. They all threw picks, and a couple of Jaden Daniels ran for 2 touchdowns, and Bo Nix ran for a touchdown. So nice to see that they're getting some things done with their feet. But definitely some rookie growing pains to really work through for all those guys. And then speaking of rookies, the rookie wide receivers didn't really impress this past weekend. Marvin Harrison Jr. only had 1 catch for the Arizona Cardinals. Malik Neighbors had 5 catches for 66 yards, but that's more due to Danny Dimes. And Rome Odunze only had 1 catch for 11 yards. On the other hand, Brian Thomas Jr. had a touchdown for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Xavier Worthy looked really explosive for Kansas City. So very interesting to see how the rookie wide receivers develop. Some deeper wide receiver rankings. Not Marvin Harrison Jr. Not Randy Moss's kid. What's his name? Jerry Rice's kid. Brandon Rice didn't suit up for the Chargers, so very curious to see how he does. I'm an Eagles fan. I don't know if you can see the polo. Big fan. Patriots are at pretty much the bottom of my power rankings if you see my rankings for the week. But we'll get to there again. But biggest surprises for week one. Bengals really stumbled coming out the gate, which it shouldn't really come as a surprise considering that they actually stumble out of the gate on a pretty regular basis. They've made it pretty consistent. But Cincinnati loses to the Patriots 16-10, continuing their trend of slow starts. Joe Burrow throws for only 164 yards, and the Bengals face a tough Week 2 opponent matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. So very curious to see how that will play out, considering that slow start will probably only continue. Caleb Williams also had a pretty slow start. The Bears were able to get the victory, so not too bad. But the Bears rookie definitely struggled, only throwing for 93 passing yards. Chicago still, like I said, gets the victory over Tennessee, 24-17, mostly thanks to a strong defense and some special teams play. The Cowboys really dominate against the Browns. Dallas really silenced the critics with a 33-17 win over Cleveland. Dak looked sharp, got locked up right before the game, and the defense racked up 6 sacks and 2 interceptions. So pretty impressive for Dallas so far, especially since they lost a cornerback in the preseason. So nice to see that they bounced back. And it looks like Deshaun Watson might be cooked, honestly, for Cleveland. They might have some quarterback problems, or they may have to look Jameis Winston's way sooner than later, because I feel like Cleveland has a very talented team overall. You know, they have a nice wide receiver core. They have got a good defense, pretty good coaching. You know, I think they just they just got Kadarius Toney, which is not really going to help their problems. But but losing Joe Flacco might really hurt them in the end. But the Falcons also have some offensive sputters. That was a pretty big surprise. And not necessarily a surprise, but the Lions roar in prime time. They looked awesome. Detroit has really improved their secondary, and Jameson Williams looks like he is here to stay. Had a breakout game with 5 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown, and led the Lions to a 26-20 overtime victory over the Rams in prime time on Sunday night. I do like Cooper and Olave both this year. Right now, I'm gonna lean towards Cooper. Or it depends who are you talking about, Cooper Kupp or Amari Cooper? I really do like Chris Olave. He had a rough week 1. Despite the Saints actually dominating and having an awesome performance. But Amari Cooper, you know, I think I like Olave more than Amari Cooper this year, just because I think Olave is going to get more targets on the Saints offense. Cooper is definitely fighting for targets, and like I just mentioned a moment ago, I'm not really sure about Deshaun Watson long term. And I mean, Jameis, even with LASIK, I don't know if he's going to be that much better. But that's pretty much the biggest surprises for the week. Like I said, Jameson Williams really had an awesome breakout game. 5 catches, 112 yards, 1 touchdown on a 52-yard bomb, which was really sweet. And a 13-yard run on an end around, which was pretty cool. He said he felt good. He got the game ball. Which he said was his first time ever getting a game ball, even at Alabama. So I guess pretty impressive for him. Long way from the injury and then the gambling issue, that the suspension. That's what I'm trying to say. But anyway, it's nice to see the speedy wide receiver break out. In interesting news, right before the game, Kendrick Lamar was announced as the Super Bowl halftime show, so that should be pretty cool. He will be performing in New Orleans. He actually performed at the Super Bowl a couple years ago. He played or performed alongside Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, and Mary J. Blige. He's got 17 Grammy Awards. So pretty cool to see him on the big stage at the Super Bowl. I heard that Miley Cyrus was rumored to do that, so a little disappointed. I don't know, disappointed, but it would have been cool to have Miley as the halftime show. maybe next year or something. Going on to my NFL power rankings for week one, which you can find on my socials. Definitely check that out. Let's see. Hold on. I traded Tyreek for Jay Jettas and Brees. Is that a good trade? Yeah, I think that's a great trade. Honestly, I think the fall from Tyreek Hill to Justin Jefferson isn't that far, and the fact that you get Brees Hall is awesome. So in any type of league, I think that you win that trade 100%. Nico for Waddle. Waddle's a little banged up right now. I actually have both of them in one of my fantasy teams, but I think I drafted Nico first, so I would say Nico, especially since I think C.J. Stroud might be on MVP caliber type season this year. Really think he's going to really spread the ball out. You saw Stephon Diggs go off week one with 2 touchdowns. Nico Collins and Tank Dell should also do real well. And Joe Mixon really looked good in week one as well, looked real efficient. And I thought Dameon Pierce was going to be taking some of those carries, but it looks like it's Joe Mixon's backfield so far. So curious to see how that goes. Go Birds. But moving on to my NFL power rankings for week one. I've got my contenders bracket, my playoffs bracket, my wild card, my work in progress, and then my pretenders. In my contenders, and this is sort of from right to left, top to bottom, as far as the rankings. I would say that the Chiefs are still reigning supreme at the number 1 spot. The Eagles are definitely looking good coming out of Brazil, the champions of South America, the only team to ever win and play on the NFL team to win on South American soil. So mini Super Bowl and championship there. But then I've got the Texans, surprise, at the 3. They moved up a little bit for me for my preseason, I guess, rankings. But then I've got the Lions and the San Francisco 49ers in the contenders. All 5 of these teams have really looked very good and look like they are vying for Super Bowls. I agree, Jalen Hurts did not look particularly good in week 1. I think he was kind of playing hero ball with a couple of those throws, especially on those 2 interceptions. I don't blame the fumble on him. I think that was more on Cam Jurgens, the center, who is replacing Jason Kelsey. So there's definitely some growing pains to work through there. But in general, the offense still looked very good. Saquon Barkley looked extremely efficient in that offense, scored 3 touchdowns. The wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, combined for 200 yards. So very impressed with the Eagles still, even despite the turnovers by Jalen Hurts. Defense looked good. The linebackers, Zach Bond, had 15 tackles and the game-clinching sack. So very interesting to see how he develops throughout the season, and the other linebackers, especially since Devin White didn't play. He seems to struggle when you flush him, right? What happened to Kincaid and Olave? They sold. Dude, I have Kincaid and Olave on one of my fantasy teams, so I feel your struggle there. Olave is definitely going to bounce back later on this season, and so is Kincaid, especially since both of those offenses actually don't really have that many other targets to go through. It's just going to take some time. Sometimes they're going to have off and on weeks, but I do like Olave to get the majority of the targets for the Saints offense, other than maybe Kamara. So he should be getting 5 to 8 targets a game, and hopefully that amount of catches and 100 yards and a touchdown. That'd be nice to complement that. And then Kincaid, he's expecting to have a very big season. I don't know how. I didn't have him as high as many other people's. I definitely like Brock Bowers a lot this year too. On the Raiders, separate tight end completely, but similar value, I'd say. He's going to shoot up. But Kincaid is definitely a nice pass catching tight end for the Bills, and the Bills are in my playoff contenders right in the middle. Moving on to my playoff row, I've got the Dolphins, Ravens, Cowboys, Bills, Bears, and Bengals. Bengals start off slow, but I think that they're still going to bounce back. The Bears are able to get a win even without looking their best on offense. Should I drop Jordan Mason with CMC returning? Jordan Mason still might be worth a stash. It depends how deep your benches are in that league. CMC is definitely the guy that you want to start, though, going forward. But I was very impressed with Jordan Mason's performance last night. Yeah, it wasn't Sunday night. He really did run the ball efficiently. So maybe as a bench stash, but depending on how deep your benches are, I totally understand or justify if you have to bench him. But moving on to the Dolphins, they looked real good. Tyreek Hill was really impressive. The fact that he got arrested right before the game and then scores a touchdown and then has that as the celebration, total badass. But but yeah, the Dolphins look good. Mike McDaniel's offense is really efficient, so we'll see how that develops throughout the season. Devin Akine and Raheem Mostert run the ball efficiently. And OBJ is still out, so we'll see how he complements those wide receivers. It does look like Waddle got a little banged up, but I'm not too worried about that. Ravens are still, in the playoff contentions, mainly because, they're still a great team. They did lose to the Chiefs, who are one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league right now. So no blame for them losing, especially considering they were literally just a toe tap away from winning. Isaiah likely had an awesome breakout game, but I am a little worried about that wide receiver corpse. They have Zay Flowers, but other than that, Rashad Bateman's not too bad, but I feel like he's that third guy. They really still need another complimentary guy. So we'll see how Baltimore develops going forward. I definitely would like to see them get another wide receiver. Happy birthday to your boy or your little brother. Robinson or Kamara. If it's Brian Robinson, I like Kamara. If it's Bijan Robinson, I like Bijan. But I do like Kamara. I have him. I have a couple shares of him in various leagues, and I think that he's actually slept on in a lot of leagues, mostly because I think he's the best weapon that the Saints have. So I really do like him long term, or not long term, but at least this year or season long terms. I really am a big fan. Worthy over London. That's an interesting question. It may depend on the matchup. I think I mentioned earlier that the Chiefs are playing the Joe Burrows in Kansas, the Cincinnati Chiefs. I'm getting everything confused now. The Cincinnati Bengals are playing the Chiefs. So we'll see how that matchup is. I do like Xavier Worthy. He's showing that his speed is really, it's just a real threat in the NFL. He's super elusive, even in the run game. He ran for a touchdown. He caught a touchdown. So very curious to see how Andy Reid, just throws him out there. The Chiefs may have Tyreek Hill 2.0 with an even faster guy. Might need to bulk up a little bit. Definitely a little small. Dak or Daniels? I'm still gonna go with Dak for now. Daniels did not prove enough for me in the pass game. Looked like he relied way too much on his legs, and it looks like Washington is just gonna be out of a lot of games. I'm pretty sure that Washington is just going to be one of the worst teams this year, and they're just trading for extra picks. They traded away a lot of their talent last year, and it's showing right now. And, it may pay dividends later with all the draft capital. I'm not 100% sure, but it is a new owner, new regime. They may get a new stadium. It is nice that they have a new quarterback. So a lot of new things for Washington, but I don't expect wins to be anything new, considering they're still going to lose a lot this season, despite the bright spots with the quarterback and some other good stuff. Some concerns for the Panthers, though. I'm not 100% sure about Bryce Young or Dave Canales. I like Dave Canales a lot in the offseason, and I'm rooting for both of those guys. And that team is definitely needs more talent. So I can't blame them too much there. But it's a struggle to watch the Carolina Panthers. Definitely love me some Sam Laporta. He's been looking pretty good, and should be a nice tight end. But I think people are sleeping on Brock Bowers if he's a free agent in any of your feet in your dynasty leagues, or not dynasty leagues, your fantasy leagues. He's definitely something we're looking at. Same thing with Bucky Irving, Brian Thomas Jr. A lot of these rookies that are maybe unclaimed are definitely some interesting guys to consider. DeAndre Swift for the Bears definitely disappointed me week one. Rashawn Johnson did not play, so curious to see how the Bears' run game develops throughout the season. But it did not look, the Bears' offense in particular just didn't look that great. So we will see. Jake Ferguson, worth a, yeah, I guess. I mean, tight ends are hard to find, so he might be worth, the waiver wire. But let's see I don't know who your other tight end is. Worth putting a trade for Puka and Amon Ra. It depends who you got. I definitely like Amon Ra, but it looks like Jameson Williams is definitely going to be fighting for some of those targets long term. And as far as Puka, he looks like he's hurt right now, so I don't know if that's the best move to do in the short term, just because I think he's going to be out. I think I've heard rumors to like 3 to 6 weeks. So I would love if you could get Cooper Kupp in season long. But if you can get Puka at a discount in dynasties, then that might be something worth considering. Moving on to the wild card category of my power rankings, I had the Falcons, Rams, Buccaneers, Packers, Seahawks, Steelers, and Jets. The Falcons are still my number one in that division, even though the Buccaneers looked really good. Baker threw for 4 touchdowns, which is very impressive, and Kirk Cousins definitely is starting to maybe show a little bit of his age. I don't think it's too much of a concern yet. They played a good opponent week one, and it's still a new offense to get those jitters out. But excited to see Bijan and Pitts do well with Kirko, and hopefully Drake London can follow suit going forward. As far as the Rams, I was talking a little bit, really like, Godwin balled out. So did Mike Evans. Mike Evans looked like vintage Mike Evans. That touchdown that he had was beautiful. Baker had 4 touchdowns, 2 to Mike Evans, I'm pretty sure, one really nice one to Chris Godwin. My guy Bucky Irvin's looking pretty good. Rashad White's looking pretty good in the pass game. They definitely have a two-headed monster there, I think, in that pass game, in that run game. So definitely look out for Bucky Irving, or pick him up if you can on the waiver wire, because he's definitely someone worth scooping up and may garner more of those targets as the season goes on. As far as the Packers, I am a little bit concerned with Jordan Love. Looks like he's going to be out for considerable, like 4 to 6 weeks. With an MCL, so a little bit worried about that. He did look good against the Eagles. Love how efficient he is with all those wide receivers. And Jalen Reed really looked explosive against the Eagles. I don't know if they weren't game planning for him or anything, because he just kept getting open. Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson were mostly held in check. Same thing with Dontavion Wicks. But Jaden Reed really exploded all over the Eagles. Josh Jacobs looked pretty good, the new running back for the Packers. Had, I think, 100 total yards, 88 on the ground, and I think like 20, 30 in the receiving game. So, not enough, and it may be a little bit tough, especially with a backup quarterback. They did get Malik Willis, so curious to see how he does in a new offense. He was with the Tennessee Titans, drafted by them, and things didn't really work out. So, nice to see that he gets a new new place in Green Bay, and maybe he'll start. CMC owner here, essentially no number two running back. Got offered Mason and McLaurin for my flex. Devontae Smith. That's not too bad. I think you're still maybe getting concerned about your ownership with CMC. I mean, I think CMC is still your stud there. But I also have Saquon and then no depth in one of my leagues, so I understand that you need some help there, and maybe trading Devontae Smith is worth it for your backup running back and McLaurin, which isn't too bad, especially since McLaurin's the number one wide receiver for the Washington Commanders. But we'll see. Monty or Jones this week. I like Montgomery, but Jones did have a good week one. Let's see. Seahawks looked okay. Run game was decent, but nothing really too excited. They looked great. I love those uniforms that they wore. They should wear those all the time. Surprising that they wore them week one. Moving on to the Steelers, who had Russ as a game time scratch and didn't actually play. Seahawks defense looked pretty good. Ravens defense also looked good. I don't know who they're both playing this week. Give me 1 second. Let's go here. I don't know what I'm doing. Alright, sorry, I got sidetracked. Anyway. The Saints looked pretty good. The Jets lost last night. The Steelers won. Oh, that's where I was. The Steelers won despite having Justin Fields start last minute. Looked decent he looked mostly like regular Justin Fields stuff. Threw for about 150 yards, ran for about 50. So regular Justin Fields, more of the same. Definitely looked at George Pickens a couple times, which is nice for my fantasy teams. I love me some George Pickens, and hopefully he can get unleashed this year with either of those quarterbacks, especially since the Steelers don't really have that much wide receiver talent outside of him, especially since they traded Deontay Johnson. The Jets definitely struggled a little bit last night against the 49ers, as to be expected, but it was at least nice to see Aaron Rodgers play a full game. He was connecting with Garrett Wilson a little bit nicely for the first half. They definitely had one beautiful drive, and then things kind of just fell asleep. It does not seem like the Jets could really hold things out, but definitely an improvement, and probably somewhat of I'd say this is somewhat exciting for Jets fans, considering Aaron Rodgers at least played the game. And, there are some bright spots from last night. You played a tough opponent in the 49ers. Moving on to my work in progress category, and this is with the Saints, Chargers, Jaguars, Browns, Bo Nix Broncos, Colts, and Arizona Cardinals. And these teams definitely have a lot more to prove if they want to be even in the wild card conversation for me. The Saints definitely looked actually really good week one, but I don't think it's going to really last, considering they're not going to play the Panthers every week. But hopefully Olave can get things going later on as the season progresses. As far as Jim Harbaugh, he gets the Chargers to get a W in their first win. But they definitely need some wide receiver help. It's definitely showing. Lad McConkey that had a nice touchdown with that double juke move, which was actually pretty awesome. And that run game looked pretty explosive. J.K. Dobbins looked good. But I just don't know if they can get much more than 9 wins this season, if I'm being completely honest. And I don't know if that's good enough for even a wild card spot. Speaking of the work in progress teams, the Jacksonville Jaguars looked decent. Love that Brian Thomas Jr. scored a touchdown. Travis Etienne fumbled, which is pretty costly, but that offense and defense is definitely looking a little bit better. Zeke or Najee, I kind of like Zeke, to be honest. I think that Zeke is gonna get more carries, but I like both of them as at least a flex play. Likely or Laporta. Now that's interesting. I think Laporta is the safer pick. I love me some Likely, and I think this is definitely going to be a breakout season for him, but I'm not 100% sure if he's going to be a week-to-week contributor. But that being said, I've got shares of him in 2 or 3 leagues, so I very much like him, but I don't know if I'm going to start him over Brock Bowers or Kittle, who I have in my other leagues, respectively. Like I said, Kincaid, I still feel safer with Kincaid right now. But I am questioning myself, Kincaid or Bowers right now. I might do Bowers. And in another league, I have Bowers over Goddard. I'm not sure if the rankings are telling me to do that, but that's what I'm thinking, at least out loud, as a fantasy manager myself. Moving on to the Browns, and it looks like Deshaun Watson could be a problem. They've got a really talented defense, and I really like that wide receiver corps that they have with Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, who scored a touchdown. They just picked up Kadarius Toney. They have Elijah Moore, so they have some nice depth, but I just don't know if Deshaun Watson is the guy to get it to him. And it's really unfortunate because they gave him all that guaranteed money, and it's not looking particularly good for the Brownies and the Billy Bean guy, because I think he was instrumental for the reason why they brought him in the first place. But anyway, moving on to the Bo Nix Broncos, baby. And Bo Nix definitely had some growing pains. Definitely not as easy as the preseason made it look. But like all 3 of these rookie quarterbacks who started, and Caleb Williams and Jane Daniels, they definitely have some rookie growing pains to work through. Bo Nix is no exception there. Most of his completions were very short or behind the line of scrimmage, which is a little bit concerning considering that was very much what he did at Oregon, and they were saying that he can still throw down the field. His throws down the field, I think he was like 2 of 11 or something. Like, it wasn't very efficient. So hopefully he improves on that later, or at least adjusts to the NFL speed and gets more on the same page with Cortland Sutton and the rest of his wide receivers. As far as the Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson made the most impressive throw of the day, and one of the most impressive throws I've ever seen in football, if I'm being completely honest. He had to readjust his footing and then just throws a 65-yard bomb in the air. It was really impressive to Alec Pierce for a beautiful touchdown. They definitely have some growing pains and definitely needs to work on the mid game. Anthony Richardson, that is. Would have loved to see more out of A.D. Mitchell, the rookie wide receiver, although you can't expect too much as a rookie wide receiver. Week 1 especially, although some of the other guys definitely broke out. So there are some guys that do it and some guys that don't. Arizona Cardinals, very disappointing to see that Marvin Harrison Jr. struggled. Hopefully he can do a little bit better going forward. Um, let's see some of this fantasy talk real quick. Um, should I accept this trade? Tua and Jacobs. I give Burrow and Swift and Watson. Tua and Jacobs for Burrow, Swift, and Watson. I definitely see the value on both sides. Depends on how your teams are. I don't value the quarterback position too much in fantasy, unless it's a super flex. So do whatever your heart thinks. But I definitely think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a bounce back going forward for the Cardinals. Kyler and him definitely need to get on the right connection. So we'll see. Hopefully he has a bounce back. I think he's an extremely gifted talent and will show that later on this season. Moving on to give me 1 second, let me just check something. All right, cool. The pretender slot, and I've got pretty much the rest of the NFL teams. This includes the Vikings, Patriots, Titans, Raiders, Washington Commanders, New York Giants, and Carolina Panthers. And these teams basically just don't really have much of a playoff hope, if I'm being completely honest. They definitely have some bright spots. Some of them even won this week, but I don't think it's really going to last. And I think that they are really showing fool's gold. And that's really starting off with the Vikings, who Sam Darnold looked pretty good week 1. But again, not against a great opponent in the Giants. Nice to see that Justin Jefferson's still scoring touchdowns and getting yards. Jordan Addison got a little banged up. I think he's going to be out a couple weeks. So we'll see how that develops. And Aaron Jones actually looked pretty good despite his age. So we'll see if he can keep up with that long term. Moving on to the Patriots, Jacoby Brissett and Gerard Mayo get their first win of the season. Congratulations to Gerard Mayo, the coach of the Patriots, who get their first win. Jacoby Brissett is starting over Drake May, which is definitely a sort of head scratcher. But Stevenson, their running back, looked real good, ran for over 100 yards and a touchdown. And they definitely need some help in the pass game. They don't really have great wide receivers. Baker on the Commanders. Oh, I have more things here. Hope Burrow picks up. I think Burrow will pick it back up. It was real weird because T. Higgins didn't play, and then what's his name? Their other wide receiver, Jamar Chase, didn't really have much of an impact and was like a scratch right before the game. So we'll see how he's got it. Yeah, he got sick. So I think the Bengals will bounce back, and they're historically pretty slow at starting the season. So we'll see. I also really do like their running back, Chase Brown. I think he's a sneaky guy that you might be able to get in waiver wire. Didn't have a particularly good week 1, and it looked like Zach Moss definitely got majority of the carries week 1, but we will see how things develop. I really like Chase Brown in the pass game, and if he can get his vision and on the field a little bit, we'll see how things develop. As far as the Titans, Will Levis isn't able to get things done week 1. Not really much more to say. I didn't really watch that game. They haven't really impressed me too much. But the Raiders couldn't get things done. Gardner Minshew could not really connect with Devontae Adams enough. Definitely like to see Brock Bowers get some targets in week 1. Hopefully that can stay. And their running back rotation was also a little bit funny. But Alexander Madison looked real good. So definitely worth maybe trading at the peak of his value or something if you've got him, or holding on to him, see what he's worth. Olave good to play this week, or should I put in Xavier Worthy? I would definitely put in Worthy, but depending on how deep your team is or your starters are, I would maybe start both of them. I like Olave to bounce back as well. Um, the Saints don't have that many targets to go to, so Olave and Kamara are really going to get a majority of those targets, if I'm being completely honest. Maybe it wasn't week one, but I think throughout the season you're going to see that Olave is going to get the most for all the wide receivers on the Saints. And, I love Kamara as well, just in PPRs at least, because he gets all those catches. Drake London, I definitely like him, on the trend this year. Definitely had a rougher week one. Bijan Robinson and Pitts had a better week one for the Falcons, but Drake London's definitely going to get his number called on a week to week basis. Kirk Cousins definitely has to develop some chemistry with all those guys, and same thing with Michael Penix. Considering Kirk definitely looked a little slow, so we'll see if that was just first week jitters and shaking off the injury, or if that's something to old age is maybe catching up with him. So we'll see what happens with Kirk Cousins long term. Moving back on to Washington, Jaden Daniels looked good for a fantasy perspective, ran for 2 touchdowns, but from a quarterbacking perspective, looked like he had some jitters in the pocket, didn't really read the defenses, if I'm being completely honest, and had decent pressure in his face, I guess. The defense he was facing wasn't particularly that great, but we'll see how he develops. Terry McLaurin hopefully can do a little bit better. Brian Robinson had a good game, and definitely looks like he is the guy to own in fantasy on the Washington Commanders. Eckler had a nice play or two as well, but I don't really expect that offense to do too much long term in fantasy. Eagles defense or Steelers? I would do the Steelers defense right now. Steelers defense looked awesome week one. TJ Watt looks like he's going to be a defensive player of the year, or at least in that conversation. Him and TJ Hawkinson were my 2 favorite guys for defensive player of the year preseason, and I'm sticking by them. They both looked explosive week one and like game changers. But TJ Watt especially really may just put his exclamation on that game, and really just had pressure all over. So we'll see if he can stay healthy and how that Steelers defense holds up throughout the season. Trade Gibbs for Amon. No, I would hold on to Gibbs. I think Amon-Ra's target share is actually going to decrease a little bit this year just because of Jamerson Williams and the also development of Gibbs. So I would hold on to Gibbs if I have that option. But what's up, Max? And then the Giants, not really much to say. Daniel Jones is definitely struggling these days. Looks like the Giants are really regretting not signing Saquon Barkley, if you ask me. Saquon Barkley had 3 touchdowns this week for the Eagles, and the New York Giants had 0 touchdowns, or at least Daniel Jones had 0 touchdowns. So very interesting to see how that goes long term. But it looks like they maybe should have drafted a quarterback instead of Malik Nabers. I like Malik Nabers a lot. Had a pretty good week one debut. I think had 5 catches for 58, 60 yards. So not, it's similar to when they drafted Saquon. It's a luxury pick on a team that can't really afford it right now. It's nice to have a Ferrari, but if you're parked out of if you're living in a trailer park, maybe a Ferrari isn't the best investment right now. Maybe get your living situation and a Prius or something. And maybe that's what the Giants are doing. We'll see if they turn to Drew Lock or I don't even know, Tommy DeVito, baby Tommy Cutlets. And then finally finishing things off with the Carolina Panthers, and they did not look good in week one. Dave Canales might already be on a hot seat, and I actually like him as a head coach prospect at least. And same thing with Bryce Young. I want to root for him. He's Short Kings baby. But they got him help with Xavier Legette and Jonathan Mingo and Deontay Johnson. Hopefully their running back in Johnny Brooks develops, but I don't know. The Panthers, they need talent on that team. They need more talent on that team, that's for sure. But I trust Joe Burrow if more depending on the status of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But depending on your backup, if you have a trustworthy backup, then maybe that's the way to go in fantasy. For my league that I have Joe Burrow, I actually have a lot of depth at quarterback. I have Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, and Bo Nix. So I'm pretty good in there. I might even actually have to consider starting Baker after 4 touchdown performance. But Brock Purdy's probably the guy that I would slide in as the starter if I don't start with Burrow. But I don't know if you have the luxury of those quarterbacks on your bench, so I can't really speak to that. But that's my quarterback situation in one of my fantasy leagues that I have Joe Burrow, so I can a little bit speak with that. Start Mason or Hubbard. Again, it depends on the status of CMC. But right now, John Brooks is out. But Hubbard didn't look particularly great week 1. But, Miles Sanders didn't look particularly great week 1. And, again, the Panthers offense didn't look particularly great week 1. So I don't really know what to say. Ashton Genty for Heisman, definitely looking like, I don't want to say the favorite, but definitely in the conversation. One of the more intriguing wide receivers in this year's draft, but it also does, I feel like, typically go to a quarterback. So we'll see if Jalen Milroe's in that conversation. Quentin Ewers. Shondor Sanders already has an L to Nebraska, so I don't know if that's going to last. But also love my guy Travis Hunter, but that's college convo. And we'll see how the college season plays out, but it always looks like the powerhouses are usually at the top of that conversation. Start Pitts or McBride. I would start McBride this week. McBride definitely looked like he had a nice connection with Kyler, picking off from last year. Although Pitts actually had a nice connection with Kirk. May depend on both those matchups. Let me actually look at week 2. If I can get to week 2. Let's go schedule. And let's go to week 2. Here we go. Week 2. There we go. So for week 2, looking ahead, we got the Bills at Dolphins for Thursday Night Football. That should be an awesome matchup. I got Josh Allen as one of my fantasy quarterbacks in my Superflex, so hopefully he can run for 2 touchdowns again. That's pretty awesome. But hopefully he can also toss a couple more. Nice to see Backpack Mac, the former Eagle, score a touchdown for the Bills. But like we were saying earlier in the convo, would like to see Dalton Kincaid get involved. Keon Coleman had a nice catch for the Bills. So we'll see the development of that offense. And then the run game is mostly just Dalvin Cook's little brother, James Cook. The Dolphins' offense is still pretty exciting with 2 Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Hopefully Tyreek Hill can get to this game without a speeding ticket and without getting handcuffed. But still hopefully gets back in the end zone unless he's playing me in fantasy. Najee Harris or Rashad White in week 2. Now that's interesting. I think I like Najee Harris in that situation. Just because even though both of those are split backfields in my opinion, I think Najee Harris is the number one in Pittsburgh, where I think Rachaad White is also the number one in the Bucks. But no, I'm sort of going back and forth. I don't know. I think I still like Najee Harris though. Baker or Dak? Let's see. Baker is playing the Lions, and Dak is playing. Who are the Cowboys playing week 2? Cowboys are playing the Saints. I would take Dak for week 2. Dak versus the Saints is a better matchup, I think. Although Saints defense looked decent week 1, but against the Washington. So we'll see. Thoughts on Swift? Swift was really disappointing week 1, along with the Bears' offense in general. Hopefully, they can pick things up and improve going on in the season, especially since Rashad Johnson didn't play in that game. But it depends on your depth at running back. If you're talking fantasy purposes, if you're a Bears fan, I definitely like him as a running back, and I think he's a good guy to have in the rotation throughout the season. I'm an Eagles fan. We had him last year. He was very good, but you can very much see that he's sort of an average running back, because even as an Eagles fan, you can see just the huge upgrade that they have from Saquon. It's I saw a funny tweet, or maybe it was an NFL meme or something, of the Eagles running backs evolving like like a Pokemon, and it was sort of like your starter quarterback. It was pretty much like Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard. So like the Eagles finally have their Charizard and Saquon Barkley. That's the best comparison I can make. So Swift was that Charmeleon, and I guess Miles Sanders is that Charmander. So that's my Pokemon analogy. But panic on Zamir White? Maybe. Honestly, Madison looked really good, looked better, and Zamir White, I think, fumbled. I have a share or two of Zamir White. I had him on my bench. I just don't trust him as a week-to-week starter yet. So depending on your depth at running back, but I might be, sounding the alarm on Zamir White, Madison, and then they have that white running back, Dylan Laube, I think, who's a pretty nice pass catcher, whereas Zamir White is really just a downhill runner. So if Zamir White can get those goal line touches, then he might be effective in fantasy, or might be a little bit of a threat, but we'll see. Trade away London or Likely for Puka and Bowers. Trade away London and Likely. I would do that in a heartbeat. I would trade away London and Likely for Puka and Bowers in a heartbeat. I understand Puka's going to be missing a couple weeks, but yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat. London had a bad week 1 and Likely had an awesome week 1, so I think you're going to sort of capitalize on that. Puka, I understand, is going to be out for a little bit, but depending on the rest of your team, I definitely like the other combo of Puka and Bowers more. I have Saquon, Etienne, James Conner, besides Zamir White. Am I good? I mean, you're pretty good at running back. I don't know what your wide receiver, quarterback, tight end situation is, but pass to you. I mean, that's a pretty good start of a team. But again, I don't know who your opponents are. I don't know the league, but start Richardson or Daniels over. I like Richardson over Green Bay, over Daniels, just because he showed that rocket arm, and he's year 2. Jaden Daniels really showed sort of deer in the headlights for me in a couple moments in week 1. So we'll see how that develops. But I was a little bit concerned with him. And I think that's more just due to the lack of talent that Washington has. They've really traded away a lot of their pieces for draft picks, and I mean they have a new team, new owner, new quarterback, so a lot of new things in Washington. So we'll see how new things aren't necessarily always better. Start Najee over Kamara? No, I start Kamara over Najee all day. Start Najee over versus Den or Kamara. I'm starting Kamara all day. I don't care who he's starting. Do I play Caleb Williams versus Houston or Justin Herbert versus Carolina? I like Justin Herbert versus Carolina, even though Caleb Williams has the better wide receivers. I think Houston's got the better defense, really like Derek Stingley and Will Anderson. And Justin Herbert versus Carolina, I think, is just going to be an easier day. So we'll see. We got about 5 more minutes of this, probably. Not going to go probably too much longer. Going to wrap things up. Maybe do a week 2 preview going forward. But week 1 was a lot of fun. Definitely check out Shawnee Football. Maybe I'll cut some of this up and make some clips. And I don't know. Let me know what your fantasy football situations are. Hopefully you're 1-0 in all your important leagues, or maybe you're tanking and going for that number 1 pick and going for Shondor Sanders or Travis Hunter or Quinn Ewers. I don't know who the number 1 dynasty guys are. There are definitely some nice wide receivers in college football this year too. But until next time, we will see you. We'll do this one last trade. Noah Weaver. Who wins this trade? Gibbs, Waddle, Chase Brown for CMC, Brian Thomas, and Kirk. CMC, Brian Thomas, Kirk, Gibbs, Waddle, Chase Brown. I feel like I like the top pick more. I feel like I like Gibbs, Waddle, Chase Brown more. But CMC is still just ridiculous, so who knows. Trade Jordan Love, Derrick Henry, and Xavier Worthy for Lamar and CeeDee Lamb. I would do that if you can. Lamar and CeeDee, that would be an awesome get. Stafford or Mayfield. To start, it depends who they're playing. Mayfield's playing. Oh, they're playing each other. Oh, wait, no, that's the Lions. Stafford's not on the Lions anymore. I'd start Stafford against the Cardinals. All right, and that's going to wrap things up. Hope to see you guys next time. I'll go live maybe a little bit later. But until then, we'll see you next time. Shawnee Sean out.